to the Startup Grind.
I'm going to introduce my guest tonight, Daniel James Scott. So give a big round of applause to Daniel, and I'll introduce him. Daniel. So I'm really psyched that Daniel agreed to do this, because I met Daniel about 2003. So I moved here in 2000, and I met him really, really early on. So he and I have lived through the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Something like that around here. But I sold the company Business Layers, and I was trying to kind of decide, what I wanted to do next. And I met him at an event here. And my goal as I grow up is to actually do as much as Daniel has done for the community over time. But those are pretty big shoes to fill, so I have a long way to go. And if I read all of Daniel's accomplishments, we'd be here until tomorrow morning, so I'm not going to do that. I would suggest just Google him, and it'll take you about a week to go through the pages of Google to get through all of it. But I'm going to give you a few little highlights, right? So he's been honored as the ASBE Entrepreneurship Educator of the Year, 40 Under 40 by the TBBJ, TBTF Technology Leader of the Year, Small Business Influencer Award, which was a Community Choice Award that he won, and Top 100 Champion. SBA State of Florida Business Advocate of the Year. And an interesting note is he actually had the first course about scaling your business taught at a university in the United States, which is pretty cool. Today, he's the co-founder of Alorum, right? Which does embeddable content, if I'm doing it correctly, right? With SEO slides, and thusly. He is the USABE Outstanding Emerging Entrepreneurship Program, which I'll screw this up forever, at USF St. Pete.
USF St. Pete, you did it right. That's awesome.
And he's also the associate editor of the Journal for Business and Entrepreneurship. And he is on the board of two local organizations, correct?
One national, one local,
One
yeah.
national, one local. As well as one of the founders of Gazelle Lab. And we have a couple other guys in the house today. Marvin Scaff and John Morrow are also here tonight. So that's a nice, quick intro. And I wasn't kidding when I said it would take a really long time to go through all of that. So thanks very much for coming today.
Thank you for having me. You have done enough. So I don't know if you all know this, but behind the scenes, every project that Joy's involved in, she sends me an email and says, how many of your kids need to come? And it's just taken care of. And it's the coolest thing. One of the big bugaboos around here is that we're all sitting around tables going, what should this community look like 20 years from now? Right. And Joy said, why shouldn't the students have a seat at that table? And she's done something about it, and that's been pretty awesome.
Well, I think it's a really big thing. I think we have to get the students involved and do that sort of thing. So I think you've done amazing things. I still have a long way to go, but I'm happy to help when I can. So speaking of students, I'm going to start really young. So I don't know if you guys ever saw, Daniel did a presentation at Ignite last year, and he has these great slides of this young boy, right, with rocket ships on and riding bicycle, doing crazy things, a shopping cart with a rocket strapped to it, and all kinds of stuff. So tell me a little bit about you when you were a kid growing up, right? What kind of kid were you?
Adventurous? Is that the thing? So I had no interest in business. I played piano fervently. I don't think I left the room with the piano in it a lot until we had internet access. Until we got a computer, I should say that, because that was kind of pre-internet access. And I was amazed at this cool creation tool sitting in the back room that nobody ever touched unless we had to my dad had to update his resume or something. And so there was a piano in this room, and there was a computer, and I just got to create. And that was the coolest thing. My dad was a musician. He's written a few books on music theory and is fairly well known. And so I just read those books and kind of just trained myself to be a fairly decent creator. And I hated playing other people's music, but I loved creating my own. Even if it was terrible and my mom called it screeching and banging on the keys, it was fun for me. And so that was kind of the genesis of wanting to just put my hands on things and be part of it.
Well, it's funny. So, how many of you guys know that Daniel actually has a theme song?
I do.
You do?
Yeah.
You do. If you go to Daniel's website, you'll find the theme song, and it's right below it is Seth Godin's theme song. So, it's funny. I was going to ask you that later. So, but Hunter wrote you the song, right?
Yeah, so actually, John Morrow, who's here today, had actually hit me the fact that this local artist was writing a book, and if you give him enough money to pre-order it, he'll write you a song.
Oh, so you had to
I'm
pay.
like-
I didn't realize that.
I'm like,
sorry.
heck yeah, I'll do that. And it's incredible. It's just him kind of hitting a couple of keys and then screaming my name.
Right?
And it was my ringtone until my wife told me it couldn't be anymore.
I don't know. I thought it was kind of interesting. It's kind of like it's got this little dramatic little build up to the end.
It's fun, yeah. No, it's the coolest thing is to be able to allow somebody the purpose to do their art, right? And so he had the book done, and he said, if you pay me a little bit extra, if you put a little bit more in the till, I'll do more art. And I don't understand how you turn that down. I know preaching to the choir here, but you can't turn that down. You're like,
right.
okay, write a song with my name in it. All right,
That's
do
cool.
that.
So yeah, so everybody has to go to Daniel's website. He's going to get a lot of traffic for people going to his website to look at it.
You can
Especially when this
also
video
hear
is.
Adam West announcing my name.
I know.
It's incredible. I'm multimedia now. It's
It is
awesome.
cool. It's like. So you talked a little bit about, so you were a musician,
I was, yeah.
and which I think is creative. That's entrepreneurial in its own right. Because I was going to ask you about your parents, but so your dad was technically kind of an entrepreneur, being a musician. I mean, it kind of all goes hand in hand, right?
Was a musician. Went to Kent State during the shootings.
Oh wow.
Opened for James Gang with his own band.
Seriously?
Seriously.
That's cool.
And my mom loves doing theater, and so I got both of those kind of in my childhood. My mom singing around the house, and my dad always constantly strumming the guitar, and it feels weird to have creation happening around you and not participating. So that was a cool gift that they gave to me. My mom had a business before I was born that had shut down because her previous husband had passed. And so she was an entrepreneur, and my dad was not. He was an English or a history teacher, and then decided when my brother came along, we can't raise a family on this, and got into banking and worked his way up, and has done quite well, but wasn't an entrepreneur per se,
Right.
but certainly said go ahead and fail because he had the art background. It's like just go do stuff. It's
Right.
like nobody's judging you. There's no audience here saying that was awful. So
But
just
that's
go
awesome.
do it.
I mean, think about parents who, like, growing up, right? And people feel so like they can't fail, right? They can't fail
Right.
their parents, and I think that's very disabling, right? As a
Yeah.
child, that if you feel like you can't do that, so that's pretty cool.
Well, and full circle, right? So we tell the students anytime we have a chance to interact, and we're going to go across the street tomorrow morning, bright and
Yeah.
early, and tell a bunch of kids that there is no such thing as failure. This is like a total subjective, like you're pitching to us, but it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't go your way this time, it'll go your way next time as long as you put the effort in. And that's the coolest thing you could give to somebody.
I think that's very true. It's cool. So, if we fast forward a few years, right? So you grew up, you got to do some cool stuff,
Uh-oh.
and you went
Are
off
these
to
the
college.
bad years? Yeah?
No,
Okay,
well,
yeah.
I don't know. Did you do something bad when you were a teenager that I don't know about? Did you do something
No.
bad? Like, because John told me a minute ago he knows bad stuff about you. So I'm
John does know bad stuff
I'm
about
like,
me.
so I'll just ask. I probably didn't know you when you were a teenager, though, so I'll have to wait until I get further in and then you
Yeah.
tell me bad stuff about you. No, so you grew up, right? You had to be pretty creative growing up as a student. You decided to go off to school. You went to FSU, but then you switched over and came back and went to USF. Why?
I like beer.
You like beer?
No, that's probably the wrong answer.
I think they have beer at FSU. I could be wrong, but
I don't think so. It was not. It was not
do
the
now.
number one party school when I was there. It was number
okay.
2. So, I was less interested in school at the time. I was at a relatively new program for the school, and I felt a little guinea piggish. So I was in an actors program, but I was not an actor, right?
Okay.
So. I'm in these programs where I have to go to these seminars once a week where they basically bring in these brand name actors and they explain to them, here's how you take rejection, which is fine. And to be able to make sure you learn the lesson, every semester we're going to make you get up on stage and audition, which is fine, except again, I wasn't an actor and I had no chops and I have a bad memory, right? So I'm sitting through the auditions and I had something ridiculous prepared, and I'm noticing over the course of a couple of semesters that people that curse get the good parts. So I'm like, okay, correlation, causation, I didn't get it. At that point, I hadn't taken a business class. And so I just get up there, I'm like, you know what, I'm just gonna go for it. how many ways can I say the F word? I wonder if I could do that. Well, I was asked to leave the program. I'm like, oh, I've got this. I got this. Because at this point, I'd actually done some semi-professional music stuff between here. So I'm just going to go audition in the music department. And I decide just on a lark, I'm not going to do it on piano. I'm going to do it on voice. So I think I sang something from Will Rogers' Follies. Because it was like a song that I had heard like the night before. I get in there and the guy pulls me aside and kind of says, well, that's not what we were looking for. We were kind of thinking you were going to sing some opera. And so I ended up in psychology, I think briefly for a semester. And then I was in a band and decided to break the band up. And I couldn't get my associate's degree because I owed some library fees. And all of these things kind of culminated.
So you really were bad in school.
I was awful. It all culminated, and on top of this, I was working in bars and at the radio station. It was awful. USF, the University of South Florida here in Tampa, was the only school that would accept my credits without the associates attached, which I told them would be forthcoming. I would pay the $5 or whatever, and they accepted me. It's the only school in the state that it allowed me to stay here, which was cool.
So at least he's honest, right?
Maybe too honest.
That's how you got there. So I think that's cool. So you came back here, you went to school.
I did, yeah.
So how did you decide to become a teacher? And I'm going to say versus an entrepreneur for now, but we're going to come back to that.
Yeah, that choice was made for me. I had a business in Tallahassee booking at clubs. If you can call this a business, I was booking at clubs, right? And I'd come up with this idea that I would spiff, instead of having these bodyguards standing outside the clubs to keep people out, I would just go rent spaces and pay them to bring people in. And then if you put like Jello wrestling in the window, it turns out that these two things actually make you a lot of money. So above Floyd's, there was a Euro shop. So I just went to the Euro shop owner. He's like, can we rent this out? I'll put a band in there. I'll put Jello wrestling girls in there. And before Floyd's opens, when everybody's waiting to get into the club, we'll just make you a ton of money. And he's like, okay. And it was like my first business. And that one actually, it did grow. I mean, eventually just let it go. But I was placing mariachi bands in Tia's restaurants. It was a weird thing.
That's pretty good though.
I moved down to Tampa, and I'm like, I would like to do this. And I met up with a friend of mine I went to high school with, and he was doing some stuff in the clubs in Ybors.
Okay.
And he said, I've got a pretty good gig here. Would you like to help me out? I'm like, no. However, like when I was at the radio station, they used to do these large outdoor events. It was Clear Channel, it was J-Core down here at the time. And it was fortuitous that Clear Channel bought J-Core down here. I happen to know a bunch of the program managers. We got a contract. We didn't know what we were doing, but we were managing these contracts. And we just kind of built from there. We got the Southern Shakespeare Festival, and then we got Disney Candlelight, and then we got some Disney other thing, and then we got Busch Gardens, and it just started rolling. And without getting into the details, that business stopped. And my SBDC counselor, Irene Hurst, who now runs the MBA program at USF Tampa, had said, well, come work for me. You'll be okay. Go get your MBA. And I said, that sounds pretty cool. And that job kind of transitioned into her going, you have some experience here. Why don't you go teach class? I'm like, okay, that was a mistake. They put me in front of 80 kids. If you can imagine, like USF Tampa is like this big like classroom, and there's like 50 eyes, like sets of eyes looking at you. And I am maybe 2 or 3 years older than these kids that have no respect for me. And I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm teaching entrepreneurship. But it wasn't really entrepreneurship. It was like, what is a balance sheet, and what's the difference between an LLC and a corporation? And that's kind of how I got into it. But I fell in love with it, and I was able to do so many cool things because of USF Tampa. I can't stress enough that the university was instrumental in getting me to where I am today.
Well, so it's interesting. I mean, you're kind of an anomaly, right? There are not a lot of educators who are also entrepreneurs, because I said I was going to come back to it. So you're not just an educator, you're also an entrepreneur in a lot of different aspects. So do you think, I have to ask this question, right? Do you think entrepreneurs are born, or can they be made?
I mean, I think people are born, and
I hope so. I'm like, I hope so.
I think you can create an environment that's conducive to entrepreneurship, and somebody will either thrive or not thrive.
Okay.
And whether or not they can persevere in that environment is completely up to them. I most appreciate the introverts in my classes because I think I can make the biggest change with them. I think I can push them to be something more than what they thought they could be, because they're internalizing, right? They're going, all these extroverts are out there going, oh yeah, I got a new business over here. And the first graduate from our undergraduate program was like that. He was all over the place, to the point where it was incredibly intimidating to the introverts, right? Because he's like, oh, I got a nonprofit, we're up in Montreal now, we're in, we're all over, we're worldwide, I'm getting national press.
Prestige worldwide, there you go.
Prestige worldwide, yeah. The only line from that song, that's my favorite movie of all time because of that one scene. But we do the science.
Right.
Never mind.
I know.
I remember the worst lines, like the Lemonheads line is the only line that's coming to my head right now. That is the best movie ever. Yeah, so I think we can create an environment that's conducive to allowing them to be able to be successful, and perseverance is something that has to either catch on or not catch on. And I think it's a switch. I don't think anything they're going to get in my class is going to switch them on if they're switched off. But what will switch them on, and I have in fact seen this, is a student has enough environmental wherewithal to say, wow, so this Joy lady gave me a ticket to go to this thing. Should I go sit with her and have coffee? And I go, yes. And then they go do it, right? And then you give them a pat in the back, and you just, they go, this John guy keeps showing up to class. Should I go meet with him? Yeah. And then eventually something happens, and they go, oh my God. And by the time they get to like somebody like Marvin, they're like, oh, I'm ready to go, right? And Marvin's, and then Marvin's like, I take credit for that. That's awesome. That's cool. Was that about right?
Marvin's not going to
Marvin is awesome.
He is awesome.
I should mention Marvin and John are both on the board at the university, and Joy is not, because I think in part because I failed to ask, and in part because I'm afraid she's going to say no. But I'll say this: the number of serial entrepreneurs that have dedicated their time to sitting down with this, not just like I'm going to judge something, but I want to sit down with the students and make a meaningful impact in turning that switch on, has been, it's awe-inspiring. And it's people that don't do it for other, I mean, it's like Gus Stavros coming to campus, and John I've seen is like sitting there with those, he does not have to, right?
Sure.
This guy has been tremendously successful, he's funded. I don't think, you can't go anywhere in Pinellas County without bumping into a building with his name on it. He does not have to do that. Sure. Right? And so it's been incredible to kind of see that happen.
But don't you think that, to your point, right, I think that part's more rewarding, right? I mean, like, judging a pitch contest, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who can judge pitch contests, and we have lots and lots of pitch contests in this town, right?
We do. We should have more.
You think?
I think we should have more. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you, I don't think there's any end result that's tangible that we can go, oh my God, that's thing. But I'll tell you, there was one, we had this dog and pony show at the Mahaffey for Gazelle Lab when it was still an accelerator program. Mm-hmm. And we invited students.
That was an awesome event, by the way.
It was cool. Mm-hmm. And my favorite part was we invited students out to pitch. And there was a student named Paul that Marvin wrote a $2,000 check to start a business, a publishing business. Marvin may not remember this.
Well, hopefully he does. He wrote a check.
Marvin writes a lot of checks. Is that okay to say? Don't hound Marvin.
Right.
Note. So Marvin wrote him, it was an allocation. So
yeah, sure.
He wrote him a check that we're going to write anyway. But wrote this kid, Paul, a check, which he translated into launching this business, which he translated into taking a job as the front page editor for Business Intelligence. And you look at that and go, so at the end of the day, did we do something considerable for everybody who participated? Maybe not. But did we make a big difference? And that's not even counting the stories of, that was the first $2,000 check that Ruben used, I believe, to start Check I'm Here, which is now a successful local startup of its own right. And I think we did some really fantastic things. I think we can do more of that, and the students need that. They need bite-sized chunks, right? They don't want to go be the Joy spinning the wheels on a lot of different projects. They can't, but they certainly want to participate if they can. I think for the students, it's vitally important. And I would say, while we're on record and I have everybody here, encourage students to come out. I have seen emails from Joy go unanswered to other universities and to other programs, and it's such a shame because our students, I don't know if it's in their DNA or whatever, but they jump by, they go, yeah, I'm going to take advantage of that. And then I see other students that kind of, well, I'm just kind of here for school, and man, if we could just get our hands on those kids, we could do some great stuff.
I mean, I think it's awesome. I've been really impressed with students that I've met here. It bugs me when I hear people go, oh, we don't have a Berkeley or Stanford here, so, or an MIT, so, we have problems. We don't have the right talent. But I would argue that it's not about where you go to school. It's about, the motivation inside the person. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not degrading any of those great universities, okay? But I've seen some really exceptional students here, and I kind of look at their work ethic and sort of how they approach things,
right?
And their willingness to kind of exert themselves and do things that are uncomfortable. Being an entrepreneur is uncomfortable.
It's wildly.
And so I think the students here, I think a lot of times they don't get their due credit in my mind. So that's just me. So I absolutely agree with that. It's interesting. So if we talk a little bit, kind of go down the path a little bit more, right? You're not the normal guy. So let's talk a little bit about.
Thanks.
I mean that in a good way. That's a compliment that you're not the normal guy. Okay.
Okay.
Let's talk a little bit about building companies, right? So you've actually started. So maybe some facts people may not know. You've actually started 5 companies.
Yeah.
Right. You had 3 that got acquired. Is that right?
Right, yeah, and the last one that got acquired, actually, Chris right here who just walked in was the partner on the last one that exited away from us.
Right, and then you kind of had one that sort of didn't work out like you maybe planned.
Yes, that's putting it lightly, yeah.
And then I'll ask you about that in a minute. And then you had one that you're still working on now, right? Which kind of has some other components to it.
Yes, yeah.
So. What kind of made you decide to not do the safe thing? Being an educator is a safe thing, right?
Yeah.
And do the scary thing.
Well, the easiest answer for that is I'm not yet, right? I'm doing both, and because I have a passion for both, and I'm working 2 full-time jobs on top of some of the other things.
I think most entrepreneurs work 2 full-time jobs, so it's okay.
It's true. You get to a point where you just, we were kind of chatting about this earlier, you just can't stop, right? And in corporate America, they call that workaholism. And in entrepreneurship, they call that just like, that's life.
Right.
Buck
Normal.
up, right?
Right.
But I think I'm so passionate about certain elements of solving problems and executing that I get so flippin' excited that I scare myself sometimes, and then I get so depressed that I scare myself in a completely different way. And so, as Chris Raisley put it, it's the alternating of mainlining cocaine and getting punched in the face in rapid succession. And if you can live with that comfort level, then this is for you, so you better like that a lot.
I always say it's like standing on the edge of a razor blade and being really comfortable with that.
Yeah.
So it's like
and you get cut periodically.
You get cut periodically. Of course you do. It's like, but it's interesting. So talk a little bit about one of the things we were talking about, talent, right? Talk a little bit about finding a CTO, right? You kind of had a Ferris wheel experience with that, right?
Yeah, we had an opportunity to discuss this at Bar Camp. When the company was started, it was me in really name only, and because the genesis of Alorum was working on sideline projects, right? So the very first project we did was a subcontract for a very large publishing house, and it was a database-driven thing, and it was like simple PHP, like MySQL stuff. I mean, it's like very we could get that stuff done, and then we worked with local publishers, and we started kind of building enough of a name where we were starting to hear their complaints about, like, what do I do with the website after you hand it over to me, and what do I do with this database after you hand it over to me? And so Chris and I started discussing how could we solve the problems that we're hearing, and then we aimed really high. We kind of went to that is the badass version of what we could be doing.
Right.
And we hired everybody in town. I'm pretty sure we hired everybody in town.
I think there was only 4 CTOs. That's what I heard.
I'm pretty sure we hired everybody.
Everybody? Okay. All right, fine.
There were 4 people that said yes to us, and on a project basis,
okay.
there were more. We'd actually, the most devastating was we had an entrepreneur who had just exited a company we loved. Our wives got along. That's like criteria number 1. And his wife got a job in San Francisco, or not yet wife, girlfriend, I guess, at that point.
Okay.
And left. And that was a huge wake-up call, is about scaling back and what's in your control, what's outside of your control. And when we decided on the idea that we finally decided to go with, which was owned embeddable content.
Right.
We said, we've got to go get the guy who knows this better than anybody else on the face of the planet. That's where you need to aim high, is on talent. If you get the right talent, it doesn't really much matter about the rest. We can solve this. And to Chris's credit, he found Jake, and Jake was this. We had our first call with him in a bar in Dunedin.
Still drinking beer, huh?
And he's still drinking beer,
Okay.
and he listened to us, and he was very measured, and he said, "Go on." And then he heard Chris talk a little bit more, and he said, he used the word revolutionary. And Chris,
that's really your favorite word, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it is.
Okay.
And Chris said, "I've got this guy hooked, right? Like I'm doing them. Yeah, I'm gonna let it out. I got it. Let it. Is Jake the right guy?" We had that like moment of like, oh my God, we know almost nothing about each other. Like we've never worked together before. This is co-founder dating at its purest form. And so we dated. We dated via the phone. We dated via Google Hangouts, via Skype, and we got to know each other. I think we had to build a level of comfort, and not just like LinkedIn profile comfort. Like we have to know each other, where we're coming from, and we're not idiots. And this guy's growing, if not the fastest, one of the fastest agencies in the entire country. He's not readily available at a moment's notice, and we're in different time zones. And at the end of the day, I think we built up enough of a comfort for him to feel like he not only wants to be a part of this, but he wanted to lead the investment round, and he wanted to jump in, and to his credit, he's stuck with us, and we haven't let him down yet. And that's the credit to a number of our team are here. We've got Victoria and Marvin, and although kind of more sidelined, I think John's been a huge influence for a lot of things. So it's been tremendous, and it's been tremendously fun, and it's been awful too. It's just like for every time you're like, oh, we're gonna get covered by this thing, it's like somebody else comes along and punches you in the gut, and you can't sleep for 2 nights. And that's I probably went way off topic, but
no, but I think that's good. But I mean, I think if you, to your point, right? So you can't sleep for 2 nights, right? But in those 2 nights, you probably figure out something else that you can add to it because you can't sleep for those 2 nights.
Yeah, and I honestly think for any of you that haven't started a business before that are watching this or are here, if you don't care that much, nobody else is going to care that much. Right. Jake joined the team because he cared, and Marvin joined the team because he cared, and it was about us personally. I had nothing. This is not at all accurate, but I have a feeling we could have told Marvin we're going to fillet fish, and if we had enough trust, he, as an angel, which I delineate clearly from a private investor, he says, "I believe in you as a human being, and I will do everything in my power to help you." And that you can't buy that, and you can't walk into it. It's earned media, as they say. And I think kind of also wrapping the students into that, it's tough, right? You can't just be like, Joy, where do I go get a CTO, and then have you not laugh at them, right? Because you have to go talk at bar camp, and you have to be part of the community, and you have to pay your dues, and you have to hire bums. And not that the people that we worked with were bums, but it was a bum situation for all of us. It wasn't a fit, and we hired too quickly, right? And so that's
There can be
kind
really
of where you
smart
walk into
people
that.
that aren't the right person to be your co-founder.
Isn't that the truth? For sure.
You know, so it doesn't mean they're a bad person or they're not talented or all the other things, but it's really about, you know, I was going to think about it's almost like being married to somebody, right?
It is, yeah.
Because you spend probably more time with that person than you do with your spouse, unfortunately for your spouse, but there's a lot of truth to that.
You can be too smart
You can be too smart.
when you're married and when you're in a business relationship.
Well, we won't ask too many questions about that yet. I might come back to that
My
later.
wife is way smarter than me, and you know, to her credit, I mean, I wouldn't be here tonight. So I bought her a Valentine's Day gift, which was to go see her favorite act in the entire world in Clearwater tonight. And I didn't put it on my calendar. And I got your email, and I said yes, because if you generally ask me for anything, I would say yes. And so she is emotionally smarter and more intelligent than me, and took her sister-in-law, and she's incredible. And there's a lot of people that are here tonight that have very young kids and have spouses that are here that don't have to be, and I just want to let you know I appreciate it. There is no ecosystem without
It's absolutely
this.
true. I mean, it's
Yeah.
all about the other people, right? I mean, the ecosystem would survive just fine with we weren't even here.
Maybe.
Oh, come on now.
Without me. I mean, if Ken wasn't here anymore, or if, like, Chuck wasn't here,
Well, no,
things would fall
I
to
said you and I.
pieces, right?
We were just talking about us. It's like, you know. Well, you brought up an interesting point, right? Like a lot of the topics around here, people talk about raising money, right? Everybody
Yeah.
here all the time, like if we only had like 45 VCs here, everything would be great. And, you know, we would be a thriving ecosystem. It'd be just like Silicon Valley, only with better beaches. But talk a little bit about like raising money, right? So you in this particular case with Alorum, you ended up with an investor who's also an active participant in the business, right? Which is ideal. But in your opinion, what do you really think that it's a capital issue here? And I'm going to ask you to follow into that. What's the worst thing about trying to raise money?
I'll answer the last one first, because that one's easy. It's time, right? But it's time anywhere, and it's not time of like going and taking the investor meetings. Those are just your job. Buck up. Right. It's the time of getting known by the right people in a trusting relationship where they feel comfortable having a person-on-person conversation about a theoretical. I mean, because I'm pitching something that doesn't exist yet from a team that, frankly, I mean, it looks good on paper, but who really knows? I mean,
Right.
You know, I could die tomorrow. I mean, this could have been my last beer, right? And so they go, well, he's not part of it anymore. And so it's all theory. So it's the time doing that, and that just takes a lot of time. I didn't just go, like the first time I ever raised money, it was from a strategic partner. They didn't have to know me. They just had to know what the intended result was.
Sure.
This time it's not that thing. I'm trying to say what we as a team are doing is trying to change the world. And as Hunter Walk puts it, there is no reasonable plan to do that. And if there was, I don't want to hear it, because then anybody could go do it, right? So
Right.
I'm pitching the unreasonable to people who want to hear it because it's coming out of my face specifically, and that takes time. Mm-hmm. It takes it. It's going to be easier in Silicon Valley, but that time doesn't go away. You still have to go out there and be there for like 18 to 24 months. Coffee and breakfast and lunch and dinner and drink meetings. If you did all of those, 18 months minimum to go do that. And so you don't just go into an ecosystem and be that person. So it's that time, and all of that time was leading up to this. Before there was an Alorum, you're going out and doing that. You can't just go cold calling somebody because they don't know you. They're not an angel to you. They're an investor, right? And that's a different relationship. So I very obviously and very publicly believe that there's two things that we can do here to help the ecosystem, you know, the 80-20 rule.
Sure.
And I do think capital is a big piece of this. I think there's some talent things that we can do. And I joined up with some people in this room and some people that work across the street to publicly say we're going to be on board to do a plan that could help foster those two things. But the delineation between what an angel is and what a private investor is, it's really hard and emotionally biased to think about that in the entrepreneurship world, especially when you're raising money. So let me take it out of that world and put it in corporate America.
Okay.
So I liken it to the private investor, the person who's just writing a check out of their own pocket because they believe they're going to get a return, is very much like your boss. They have a vested interest because if you do well, they look good and you both get promoted.
Sure.
Right? An angel is like a mentor in the corporate environment, and we've all had them. They are not your boss. Your mentor is not your boss. They don't serve that function. I have had some incredibly smart, wickedly smart, way smarter than I can ever hope to run into in the normal course of a life. I've had some incredible mentors, and they have a different set of objectives. They are not aligned with you specifically. They're aligned with you because of who you are and because they care about you and they see something in you that they believe in.
Right.
And we can do with less private investors, and we could do with a lot more angels. Now, as that is with VCs, I'm a pretty big believer you can go get institutional money pretty much anywhere, and the people that have done well here go and raise elsewhere. And that's fine. They're comfortable getting on a plane. I mean, I haven't had to do that myself yet, and I see that. I mean, you get on a certain path, unfortunately, and that's what's difficult about being here in the Tampa Bay area is we took a seed round, right? And then we go out and say we're going to raise a Series A, and regardless of how small it is, you've made the gut-wrenching decision to say the next course of action for this business is going to raise again.
Right.
Right? Because I put myself on a trajectory that I can't grow my way out of, unfortunately. Sure. So that the piece that we're sitting in now is by far the most difficult place on the face of the earth to be. Because chances are you're not going to cross the chasm from your own company's perspective into Series B. And if you are, it's because you're tremendously lucky or tremendously well connected, or you have just like these mind-blowing people around you, like I'm fortunate to have that are willing to take some arrows so you can be more successful. And there's not enough of those people that are also writing checks with their time and their talents and their checkbooks to do that and to protect you. And I don't know how much of this I probably should be bringing up, but Marvin has, for us, has been that angel, right? So he stepped in and said, you're, for lack of a better, you're gonna fuck up, right? And so don't just keep me updated, because like if you screw up this week, like he's awesome. I don't know if he even does it intentionally. He'll just, if I send him an email going like, yeah, we blew it this week, he just won't respond, which is like the appropriate response, right? And then and then when I send him an email going, hey, we did something pretty good, he's like, attaboy, like that was a good job. I've been through this before. I get what you're doing. Like, he can't be that for everybody, but he is that for a lot of people. So I hope you don't mind me kind of publicly saying that. And Victoria's another of, we ask her a lot of very pointed questions, and she gives us a lot of very pointed answers. And probably without even recognizing that she's doing it, we go, we fucked up. And she goes, okay, that's cool. Like in this very like cool Victoria, like nonchalant, like, yeah, it's good. and then we'll like ping her on Hip Chat, like, oh, we did something awesome. That's cool too. Like, I'm really excited for you. And to me, those are angels, right? And it doesn't matter if they wrote a check or not. I mean, it's helpful when they do. Jake has been an angel, literally manna from heaven, not an investment because he thinks this thing is going to be massive, because you can't think that way that early on, but an investment because he believes in the project and he believes in the team and he sees the progress and the traction being made and he knows where we're going next, which is kind of critical. Which a lot of that stuff you can't just go publicly
Of course.
like go disclaim like, oh, we're going to do all this great stuff, right? Like Chris and I are pitching in a couple of weeks, and we're kind of like, okay, well, there's things we would tell them privately that we're not going to reveal to an audience of 100, right?
Of course.
There's the danger of that. So from a capital perspective, I think there's absolute terror being in Tampa Bay, saying, how do we get from seed stage? And I've had these conversations with these really great companies that I don't know how public we are about how they've left in mass relatively quickly.
Sure.
All of these people were just Breakfast Club members of mine. We would go and meet and discuss and kick ideas around, and my level of frustration hasn't reached to the boiling point yet where it's been enough where we would move the company, even though our CTO isn't here and he's in California, and God, wouldn't it be easier to be there, right? But they had made the decision. Why? Because they could see an easier path to raising that Series A and getting enough street cred and that startup badge on their chest that would allow them to go do Series B no matter where they are. And I do respect folks like Kevin who went to Y Combinator and then said, I don't have to play the game. I can come. I have a business of my own that I don't have to fundraise. There's nothing more respectable than doing that and being able to build. But there is a capital problem here, but it's a cultural and it's a philosophical issue more than it is a money. I mean, there's the money's here. It's just getting the money people with the we inherently we go, oh, you have a PhD in chemistry. Stay here and invent stuff, and we'll go pipeline money to you. Like literally, we'll go up to Boston and bring money home in trucks, right? But I go get my PhD in computer science, and I go, best of luck, buddy. Oh, you need 200K now. Oh, what are you going to need next? $1 million? Well, I just gave the chemist $5 million Series A, and I have a Brinks truck with 14 waiting to be delivered to the same guy. It's that piece of that like really starts to
It's
get
pretty
at
funny,
me.
and I'm gonna let them remain nameless. But there was someone came to me and said, "You need to go help fix this company," right?
You?
Yeah. So it was the person who said,
Alright.
"You need to go do this," right? So it's very interesting how people will say, "You need to go do this," and it was something that came out of one of the universities, and there were a lot of PhDs involved, and it's not in the information technology space, right? It's in a different space. They had blown $15 million over the course of 7 years, and they have nothing, nothing to show for it, right? And they're like, well, they've got some research. I'm like, well, that's cool, but that's not a company. And they need another 20 million. And they're like, well, I'm like, okay, who's going to give them 20 million if they blew 15 and they don't have anything on the other side? I'm like, that's crazy talk. But we see it happen here all the time. But
And we don't blink.
not in infotech, right?
Yeah, we don't blink. But when a software guy wants to do it, it's like, well, best of luck, right?
It's like, can't you do that on Amazon for $5? It's like,
Yeah, we question their motivations, and so when I meet with people now, I try to find common ground, and I try to sell myself on what they're doing, and then I try to get to know who they are, and from there we can start working on channels of development, which is cool. But I mean, you still have to have somebody that's going to write the initial check without fear that investment doesn't have a pipeline in a marketplace here in this market, right? And there can't just be 2 or 3 guys writing checks. Because they can't scale up all the companies that we have to offer. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. We got plenty of talent here. We just don't have enough.
We have plenty of money. We're just not filling in the right bridges in between.
We're not yet.
Right.
But there's been
changing.
There's been some announcements recently, and there will be some announcements coming up that I think are going to be pretty cool and will help fill in, and we'll start seeing the success there. And as those people build successful businesses, they'll spill talent. It happens.
That's right.
And that spilled talent will feel completely comfortable taking that ride again, and there'll be money there for them too. And I think we can get there. One of the things that John and I did when we were looking at this Tampa Bay 620 plan, because we had to go sell this to traditional economic development, right? So we had to sell why there's a challenge and what the steps are to resolve that challenge, and then what the intended result is. We did this stuff. We didn't tell anybody we were doing it. We just said, okay, there's STEM. There's people that can actually make stuff.
Sure.
And then there's business. There's people that can actually sell stuff. We had a hypothesis. We said, we wonder what the rate of graduation is from people who can make stuff to people who can sell stuff. And it turns out at the graduate level, where you typically would want to hire these people or put these people in position, for every opportunity to do anything in STEM on a graduate level, there are 6 opportunities to get a degree as an MBA alone. That's not even counting the sub like MS in management or MS in marketing. And in engineering specifically, we're sole source. We're USF Tampa alone, right? So if I really want to recruit and I don't want to fight with the hassle of USF Tampa, I've got to, as my wife does, go up to Gainesville and recruit, or go out to UCF and recruit. And that challenge is difficult because those students are also world-class talents that are being recruited from outside the state as well. So it's tremendously difficult to say, stay here and take equity when they're getting offered more money than they've ever seen their entire life to go work outside the state. And so I think between that, I don't feel comfortable taking your startup job with all your fancy equity when it's not going to be worth anything Series A, right?
Sure.
And that we just aren't producing enough of these bright kids. Somewhere in that gap is something that I think we can resolve in the next, I hope less than 20 years, but I think most of us here in this room have signed a pledge to say we're going to make this something we can resolve within the next 20 years, and we're not going to let it alone until the problem's solved.
I think the 620 plan is a great resource. Somebody told me one day, they're like, we need a map of the startup community. I'm like, it already exists. I'm like, it's online.
And it's open
been there
source.
for a while. It's,
It's,
you know, if you think something's missing, send an email. They'll fix it.
Or do your own. I mean, so we didn't do a map, right? So when
It's
John,
not a map, but it has all the resources.
But it has the resources, but easily it could be a map, right? So one of the things I don't have time to do, but I think would be a cool thing, is to take the resources that are on that and what Mark Sharp had put together here for Hillsborough County specifically, which gets a little bit more granular and a little bit more outside what we're doing. But take that and actually make a map. So when I come to Tampa and I get off the plane, where do I go? Like, wouldn't that be cool, right? Like I almost want to put it like a Beats Music type of thing. Like, I am an investor and I am in Tampa and I want to go see, bioscience startups. Like, and then it'll be like, okay, well, there's this nondescript office center just north of USF Tampa. Like, tell your taxi driver to go to this address. Like, show him. I think that would be cool. Or, I want to see, scalable software startups, and it has a map to emerge, and like, it'll just take you 3 blocks down the street where Marvin's building all these fantastic software startups, and like, these are investor worthy, and most of them have had investment and they're killer. And something like that, I think, it may not be a map, but it's certainly something that we can point to and go, I'm proud of that,
Right.
for sure. But you're right. I mean, the information's not hiding.
No. So we talked a little bit about finding the right CTO, right? Finding money. So we talked about a little bit about talent. We talked a little bit about money. In building the startup, right? So I'm building Alorum, right? So we'll talk a little bit about that, right? What have been the other biggest challenges that you faced, right? Outside of talent and outside of money, just from an entrepreneurial standpoint and actually building a business.
You determine relatively quickly that there's no book, right? So I can ask Joy, what am I going to have to do to get my business started? And she'll throw her head back like this. Like, I can tell you the next step. We can do that conversation. And so I learned pretty quickly that Chris and I get together and we toss ideas back and forth in person, and then we get on HipChat, we throw ideas back and forth, and then if we feel comfortable with that idea, we go to the portion of HipChat that has Victoria in it, and we throw ideas around, and then we spin and we all get excited, and then we move to the who else do we need to roll this out to, and typically it's Marvin first, and then if Marvin's so awesome, I can't oversell the Marvs. So
He's gonna blush again though, because that's what he did when I had him in front of the room the last time when I kind of talked about him a lot, and he started blushing. So he's gonna start blushing in a minute.
He's so good. He'll give you enough rope to hang yourself, which is a blessing and a curse. But then when you come back to him, he already knows what you're going to say. Like, hey, that didn't work out, did it? No. And then the true test of whether I'm fooling myself or not is I will go to John Morrow, who has, if you're not familiar with Mr. Morrow, he's exited several businesses, and to be frank, you would have never known it if you just ran into him at Kawa. It was pure circumstance that I was in a position where I was reviewing DoD technologies for a previous job, and I was on the road a lot, and there was one company in Tampa Bay that I got the opportunity to underwrite, And it was a division of Morrow Technologies. And I go, okay, I know what this company's doing, and it's kind of terrifying, and I'm not going to ask John yet. But then my wife and I are driving out. We live in North St. Pete up in Caroline, and we drove out onto 28th to get out to Pinellas Park. Don't ask me why, that's a long story. And we drive by this other thing, this Janus Displays, a division of Morrow Technologies. And we're like, can't be. No, there's no way. And so I finally ask him, and he admits to those two.
Oh, okay.
Right? And I've known him for close to a decade now, I would assume, and I'm still learning about businesses that he started that are absolutely, at the same time, I thank God he was born in America at the time where he could do these things for us and not for some other country, and also terrifying about what he's holding up in his head. So when I when I say we're going to have a coffee meeting, at this point, when I bring something to John, I prep for the meeting. I write notes that John never sees that I'm sad I'm admitting to now. And I do the same thing for Marvin, but Marvin doesn't want to see my notes. He wants to hear me say it, which is cool. But when I take it to John, and then he'll sit there for a second and go, and then he'll ask one of those questions that you can't recover from. And you either go, I'm going to do that in spite of that question he asked, or I'm not going to do it. And I try to model what I do. And then if push comes to shove, he has fully grown kids of his own that he asks the 5 whys, right? So why? He'll just keep doing it. And you go, I don't know why the sky's blue, John, stop. And the only thing I can say is if you're an entrepreneur, you can't really look. You can have a vision that you can stick to, and you can be passionate about it, but you can't go too far planning. You can have a business model that can take you a few steps forward, and you can have awesome people in your life, and I would strongly recommend that you can run those ideas by to make sure you're not committing suicide. But yeah, that is the way to do it, right? It's to have these awesome people that are out there, the Kens of the world that for every time if I had a nickel for every time I've told Ken I was going to do something, and he's kind of straightened me out as to why it wasn't a good idea, I wouldn't have to be raising money.
It's a lot of nickels.
That's awesome. But I would have done those things if this community wasn't here. I can't go replicate that in Atlanta because I think it's easier to raise money there. That's bullshit, right?
You're right.
It's better to be here with people who care about who you are as a human being because you're located here and you agree that this is awesome, and you agree that there's awesome people here. And that was probably the longest answer ever, and you probably have better questions.
It's okay. Actually, I'm going to ask a couple more questions. I'm going to open up and let the audience ask questions. So they're really going to put you on the spot in just a minute. So, but to Daniel's point, if you want to hear more about kind of what he was talking about as far as like the killer vision and then forgetting yourself, go watch his talk from Ignite last year, because actually that was part of the premise of the talk. You talked about Sondheim, right? Stephen Sondheim, and the fact that he had 10 failures before he ever created West Side Story, and why you shouldn't give up. So I'm going to segue into something else related to that. So you talk about FTW. That wasn't WTF, by the way. It was FTW, just in case we're all clear. So tell me what that means to you. I mean, it's a hashtag, it's an acronym. A lot of people know what FTW is, but what does it mean to you specifically?
Well, it's about doing what you care about and what you should be doing with your life. I had this opportunity. There was an arts accelerator that opened, and with artists, it's interesting, right? Because they get off on these beautiful side projects, and it's maintaining focus is their core objective. And so I had the opportunity to tell them that everything has to be measured. You only have so much time. And if you're going to create art, create a circumstance in which you create art. That's a win.
Sure.
There's nothing wrong with that. If you want to create a business, like you're an accelerator program to create a business around your art, that's a different thing, right? And there's a lot of stuff that you have to do that you're just not passionate about that you either need to outsource or you need to build it into your win structure, right? And so I told them, and I try to make these things as catchy as humanly possible so people remember them. But in your relationship, in life, in business, in art, You can fake an orgasm, but you can't fake passion.
That's very true. I agree with that.
And you know what? I mean, you can go through your life faking orgasms, and you know what? People, TechCrunch will write an article about you.
Sure.
It's surprising, right? And people will pat you on the back, and they may even give you money. They may even work for you.
Could be.
But it will go away.
Yep.
It will go away. I mean, the Simon Sinek TEDx talk, I show that in every class. We talked about flight and how the brothers, because they were doing it on passion, did it. And the party that was there for money, as soon as they went into flight, even though they were well-funded, they stopped. Because it wasn't passion, he was faking an orgasm, right? I was paid to orgasm. I did it. He was a prostitute, right?
Sure.
And we only have flight. We have commercial flight because of St. Pete. I always got to throw that in, right? But we only have flight because people that were passionate about it took the initiative to go do it, not
Sure.
because they were chasing VC money or they were going after their startup badge or they were, it's, Marvin's throwing an accelerator party called Gazelle Lab. I'd like to be part of that. You can't do that. Nobody gives a shit except for you. So you better build it so you win.
Right.
You better get something out of this. And if you're creating value for the rest of the world, then you're an entrepreneur. That's great. That's awesome. But make sure you're getting yours because you'll burn out. I mean, it'll happen.
True.
It's happened to all of us.
It has. It does. It can be lonely sometimes. If you had to do your career over again, right? You're starting again after the bad boy days of, Jello wrestling and drinking lots of beer. Okay.
That's just college. That's tame for the people across the street.
I know
All
about
right,
the people across
cool.
the street. We'll leave them alone right now. We're going to see them tomorrow, so we'll leave them
See
alone
them
right
bright
now.
and early tomorrow. That's good.
So if you had to start your career over again, what would you do differently? What change would you make?
Man, that's really like.
You don't get to pick 10. You only get to pick one.
It's painful, right?
Yeah.
Because there's like the woulda, coulda, shoulda type of thing. There's a couple of decisions. We didn't really talk about how I started my career, which was as a musician, right? So,
Right.
Frankly, I would have made a couple of key different decisions there, and I would have stuck with that. I would be a touring musician today, and
So next time
I
you
would have
come
been
and talk,
just as
I'll have
happy.
you start out that way.
oh God, let's not do that.
Oh, let's do it. It'd be fun.
I'm well out of practice.
It's okay.
I would be doing that, and to me, it's no different a life choice than doing what I'm doing today. I get to create things that allow people to get massive benefit, and yet music is shorter term, but you can change somebody's life with a piece of music, which is cool, and I love being part of that. But I can change somebody's life just as easily by putting together a class that allows them to believe that there's not one right answer to a question on a test, and that just because you had to get through K through 12 doing that doesn't mean you have to do that anymore.
Sure.
And putting them in front of somebody like Nathan Schwagler, who absolutely convinces them in a classroom that you're going to screw up, and that is actually the point of today's lesson, and it's going to be the point of tomorrow's lesson. And then when you go take Daniel's class, it's going to be the point of that lesson. When you go take Bill Jackson's class, it's going to be the point of that. And if you decide to go do your grad degree over at USF Tampa, Mike Fountain is going to make damn sure that is the point of the lesson there too, right?
Sure.
And that's cool. And if I don't know what'll happen after they graduate, but I do know I can make that small indent in their life there, or I could have made it there. So realistically, I would have done that.
Okay. So I have one last question for you, then I'm going to open it up for other rounds. Describe, if you had to pick one word to describe your life as an entrepreneur, what would it be?
Fun.
All right.
Fun, man. If it wasn't fun, why would you do it, right?
Awesome. Awesome. Anybody have questions for Daniel?
Oh, Lord. So I think the most interesting thing you kind of touched on is the difference between a student and a teacher and a mentor and a mentee. Yeah. Can you kind of talk about, your experience in education and what it's like to work with students and then be an entrepreneur that works with mentors and how important is traditional education in making entrepreneurs versus, what you're doing now, learning from business people that have done it already, and how do they play into each other?
Yeah, so if I don't answer your question, circle me back around, all right? So I had the honor and the privilege of being around the start of the graduate program in entrepreneurship at USF Tampa.
Right.
And that was very specific. The student decides I'm going to be an entrepreneur, and I need the big T's, right? I need the technical skill to be able to go do entrepreneurship, and that was cool. And then I left the university and I went and did a couple of other things, and then I met this Bill Jackson character, right? Who is this ultimate? He's like the coolest. I picture him with like a scotch in one hand, a cigarette in the other, and a Southern gentleman, and my brother had him in class, and they did not get along. So the first time I met Bill, I'm like, oh God, he's gonna hate me, and we're not gonna get along. And within the first few sentences, he goes, Daniel, I'm gonna build an undergraduate program in entrepreneurship here. And ignore that I said that for a second. We're gonna focus on building awesome people. What do you say that? I mean, like that now, like my world blew up. And it was so right. Instead of the big T, it was the little b. It was the behavioral, right? It was an experiment. Can I take somebody who was, through their education, told there was a right answer for everything, and you had to be in class on time, and you had to do things their way, and could I reverse that in like 18 months? It was a huge challenge, and it was so cool to be able to play that game. And so I think that's what we're doing with the ecosystem here, is we're going, okay, well, it was structured before. It was like, oh, we have to go be Silicon Valley, we have to go be somebody else. And like guys like you are going, I don't have to be any of that stuff. And the stuff that I like around me, my hackerspace, my startup bus, none of that has to be anything like that. I just want to give you a space and an environment in which you can fail a lot. And eventually, over enough beers, you'll feel comfortable like doing that. And guys like you who are starting companies today, they're going to be successful, are going to be the guys that remember a time when it was crappy to start a business up in the Tampa Bay area fondly, right? And then you're just the next generation, like you're the one like doing what Marvin's doing. It's like, I've done this before, I've been successful, I'm putting money back into these people because I care about them as human beings. And that's no different in the academic environment, except it's by semester, right? So we just try to do as much outside of class. And if I had 50 opportunities a year to get them pitching or to get them writing business models and presenting those, I would do that. And I would love to be able to do that here locally a heck of a lot more. And we've been fortunate because of the support of a lot of people that are standing in this room to have opportunities like tomorrow, where students from all over the Southeast and frankly all over the country are coming here to pitch, and our students are going to blow them away. And you know what? It's not because our students are from Tampa Bay and they're from Mississippi or whatever. It's because, like, this guy's grinning here in the back. This guy Chuck has spent a ton. This guy right here has, every time he's not on a plane leaving here and coming back, he is spending with those students, and you can't replace that anywhere. And it's not just Chuck, it's John and it's Marvin, it's all these people standing around that are donating in joy. They're donating their time and their love to the students.
Cool. Any other questions? Oh, Chuck, of course.
So you're a half a generation younger than me and John, and your students are a half a generation younger than you, right? Generation being about 38, 40 years. What's the generational differences? We grew up in a different kind of mode being entrepreneurs than you are. What's the differences? What do you see? Because you've dealt with all of us, right? You deal with the old guys, you got your generation, and then you got the students. How do you adapt the message to the younger generation?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest difference, so I didn't do so well at Florida State, but then I came down here to USF Tampa, which was a cultural wake-up call because it was a commuter school, right? We were transient. I went to class and then I left. So my USF experience was transient. I get down to USF St. Pete, and these kids, for the most part, even if they own cars, they're like skating or biking into class. They live and they work and they play all within like 6 blocks. And they care about things so much. From that, like, they want to make a difference, I don't care how I do it. I don't care if entrepreneurship is the vehicle, right? Like, I looked at it as the way to make a difference in this world is go start a business and make a difference. And they go, I don't got to do that. I can make a difference without doing all your BS structure around that. I just go do it, right? And
true.
so we have these kids are incredible and so resourceful and so crafty at going, I'm going to go do this and I'm going to beat a path that other people can follow that are coming out. And so they're so cognizant of what's going on around them. I'm surprised and I'm mystified about the energy and the ability that they have to go, I'm looking out and I'm looking sideways, I'm looking behind me, and I'm doing things that aren't going to hurt anybody else when I'm moving forward. And they're just so freaking cool. They're just so cool. Not a cool like Fonzie way, like a cool like, they think of things I would never think of, and I go, God, you're just awesome, right? And it's I didn't get the internet installed until I was in college. I went to college, and that's when I got the internet, right? And we had a computer in the house, but it wasn't high powered. Like I could print things on those printers that had like the punch holes on the side, right? Like I wasn't doing any computing. But they weren't born that way. And I heard this thing recently of like this one tweetable moment, and you might have even shared it. I don't even know. But it was like, think of how poor you thought technology was when you were a kid. That's what the kids today are going to think of the iPad when they're adults. And I'm going, oh my God, that's like mind blowing. But that's what they were raised on. And the technology that was mind blowing to me, like, I think because there weren't the prevalence of computers, you guys took on challenges that I couldn't dream of. And you had to run through her, like the stuff that you and John have done. I couldn't fathom bringing myself to do that today, and it's too big in scope for the students today. They want to be broad more than they want to be deep, and I think there's something admirable about that. And if we can make them deep as well, man, there's just no stopping these kids, and they're unmanageable in the best sense of the word.
Cool. Adrian?
Hi.
Hi. Thank you for coming. This has been really, really engaging.
God, thank you for having me. This is
fantastic.
awesome.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm only here because somebody dropped out, but that's
not
still a
true.
win.
That is totally not true.
So have you always been a leader, or did you decide to be one? And if so, why do you think, whichever answer you're going to give us?
Wow, that's cool that I could make a choice, right? I doubt that was. See, I don't know if I think that's something that somebody says to you, and it feels uncomfortable, right? So, one of the things that the TBTF had given me this unreal honor this year, and I remember when they called my name, I said, "But I don't know what I did to deserve that." Like, there's a dude curing cancer at the next table that did not get this, right? And I think you have things that are within your control, and you have things that are not within your control. And my favorite adults say I can organize the stuff that's in my control enough that I can exert influence over the things I don't necessarily have control over, but I think I can make an impact on. And enough of those people were part of my life early enough on that it got passed on to me, and I was in a position to pass that on to other people. And if that makes I don't know if that's the definition of leadership, but it's certainly, I think it's something, it's that aspirational, and I like doing, right? But I don't lead anything, right? I mean, there's an academic program that's in part in my charge, right? But I don't know that it's any more in my charge than it is to John or to Bill or to Nathan or to any of the rest of our board members, right? So I think from that capacity, there's lots of great ideas floating around, and you just try to influence towards how could we make this, how could we kill as many birds with this magic stone as we possibly can? And what's really sincerely great about that, at least in academia here locally, is the other people that are doing this, the Rebeccas and the Michaels and the Amy's and the Bills and the Johns and the Franks down at Ecker. I mean, these people think that way. We're just going to make more cool people, and it feels uncomfortable to be received because leadership kind of says there's some entitlement or entitlement from my end, or there's some responsibility for somebody else. And I don't want to claim either of those. So, but I'm going to try to do and continue to do as much as I can to help. And so advocacy, I'm much more comfortable with. I did not answer your question. I'm very aware of that. Hi.
Hi, I'm Denise, and Trudy and I have started a business, but we don't have a business background. I mean, we've been in business for 3 years, and we're passionate,
Yeah.
and we're diligent, and we're tenacious, and we're experts in the field we come from.
Yeah.
But do you feel like we should be taking business classes and should be getting, I hate to get another degree, I've had so many, but get another college degree in business?
No. I mean, I think there's a difference between education and being a lifelong learner, right? And there's so much material out there. I mean, the stuff that we actually bring into class, I'm always embarrassed sometimes. There's so much good stuff out there for free. I feel more like I aggregate or I cultivate a set of curricula that can allow somebody to be successful. But from a business owner's perspective, I almost find that it might be irresponsible to say I'm going to go do like a 4-year or 2-year program somewhere, when realistically, there's just so many flipping cool tools to go out there. And
that's kind of what we've done. Okay, we want to do this. Well, let's start reading and
Yes.
researching. And I guess having a teaching background helps, but and then teach ourselves. And we want to learn how to do the art part of this. Oh, well, let's go learn this program. And we
Yeah.
want to learn how to do
But I
the
think that's what's
technology
changed
part
about
of this.
entrepreneurship in
Let's
general.
learn everything we want to know about apps and
Yep.
put it into an app.
But I do think that's one of the things that's changed about entrepreneurship in general, back to Chuck's question, over time, right? Like now there are tons of things that are available on the internet. It's easier to reach people, whether it's the person who you see at the coffee shop, right? And you run into Daniel and ask him a question, right? Or whatever, or whether it's somebody that you look up for something on the internet, you find a person, you reach out to them, and people post their knowledge, right? People didn't used to do that. Right now, people give their knowledge away for free. It's like it's the internet has changed, and will continue to change forever how people view everything about life. Some good, some bad, right?
I know, it's
But-
funny, I have physicians that I've worked with that have come to me and said, you share things too easily. Stop sharing your knowledge. You have to keep X amount of secret to yourself.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you
You know,
put yourself
I mean, you don't want to violate a HIPAA policy,
Yeah,
but
right.
outside of that, I think sharing what you know and
what I can to
yeah,
help
to help make the world a better
people achieve
place.
so that
Sure.
then they can help their patients.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's where content marketing comes into play. I'd be more than happy to have a conversation with you.
Woo! There we go. Well, hey, I'll wrap up the filming and stuff now, but if Daniel's gonna hang out for a little while if you guys want to ask questions. But I have one last thing for Daniel. So while I was at Startup Grind a couple of weeks ago, we actually gave out these medals for people who had done such a great job of building startup communities. So these went out to people, directors and stuff from around the world, different people who had done a really great job of building their community. And I was thinking about the fact that you were going to be my guest. So I stole one, not from a person, just so we're clear. Okay. So I did, but it's actually engraved on the back for Startup Grind 2014, and I have a medal for you, sir.
Holy cow, thank you so much, wow.
And your very own Startup Grind t-shirt.
That's awesome. You can't see it, but it's a fist bump.
It is.
That's the coolest thing ever.
It is.
That is awesome. Thank you.
So everybody, please give a big round of applause for Daniel and thank him so much for coming out tonight.